Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock. We are live from the Willink Studios. Welcome to all parents, all students, to our GCSE options evening. My name's Mr. Ballantyne. I'm one of the assistant heads. My role tonight is to act as host and technical producer for this, our first Willink live event of the year. So basically, if anything goes wrong, it is my fault. The sweepstake has started on the number of times we will say you're on mute tonight. Place your bets now. Here's how this evening will work. In a moment, I will introduce Mr. Fry, head teacher, who will introduce the evening. And joined by him will be Monsieur Collot, head of assistant head in charge of Key Stage 3, and also head of Year 9, Mr. Jubb. There'll be a presentation about how to choose your GCSE options. And then comes the exciting bit where we are joined live across Berkshire, Oxfordshire and Hampshire by around about 15 of our heads of departments, subject leads, who are there to answer your questions about what taking one of their subjects might mean. So if you look up on the top right of your screen, you'll see a Q&A area. If you want to ask any questions, please do. Here is the schedule for this evening's Q&A, starting at 6:30. Each of the subject leads will be answering frequently asked questions about their subject. So you can choose to stay for the whole evening, or you can decide to jump in and out of the subjects that most interest you. The whole evening will be recorded and will be up on our website on YouTube in the coming days. So, without further ado, I am going to introduce Mr. Fry. Mr. Fry.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Yes, I am unmuted, but I do have my traditional alternative microphone here should things go wrong. So a warm welcome to this evening. Warm welcome to parents and students, but also a warm welcome to prospective students and prospective parents of students who may be considering joining the Willink in Year 10 in September. I'll say more about that in a little while. So yes, in this evening we've got the colleagues on the screen there presenting. Mr. Collot, he oversees Year 9 on the senior team and the options process. Mr. Green, who's not with us this evening, is the guru in putting all the choices together in a big hat and throwing them in the air and making certain it comes down in a logical way so that the vast majority of our students get the choices and options that they want for next year. And Mr. Jubb, who is here this evening, first time on national television, and a warm welcome to him, and he'll be telling us a bit about the process, how to choose, when to choose, and all the paperwork and things like that. So in those immortal words of Chris Whitty, next slide, please. Thank you, Mr. Ballantyne. So just want to spend a little bit of time talking about the curriculum that we offer here at the Willink. We do have school aims, we do have a school policy, and parents may like to go to the website and have a look where you'll find a lot of this in more detail. This is an important occasion this evening because it is the first time that there is choice in the curriculum. Some schools provide choice at the end of Year 8. You may have heard some schools, some local schools to us, where students make GCSE choices at the end of Year 8 and then continue them into Year 9, 10 and 11. Now our philosophy here is really to keep the doors open as long as possible and to delay specialisation till Year 10, and we think this is really good and actually logical. And in these times with a pandemic and students haven't had that much experience in school over the last few months and the last year, really important to make that delay as long as possible. And also, of course, some schools that do make that 3-year 9, 10, 11, a 3-year GCSE, once you've made your choices, you're sort of stuck with those choices for 3 years. So it works sometimes against students as well. That said, we do have subjects that have a 3-year GCSE. So more specifically science, they have already begun their GCSE course and content in year 9, and also with in RE as well. Anyway, so there we are. That's the sort of background. On the sheet on the slide in front of you, these 3 components really, and I think the thing is at the Willink we really want our students to become successful learners. So this means that we want you to enjoy your learning, not just in year 7, 8 and 9, but as you go into year 10, 11. Successful learning is about assessing your own progress and knowing how to improve and develop further. It's about achieving your best. It's about acquiring a foreign language. We've got at Willink, we've got a heritage as a language college, as a language specialist school, and we think learning a language is important for the wider world out there, and it's also good brain work as well. Brain gym gets your mind into gear, so we think that's really important. In terms of confident individuals, we want the students here to articulately communicate, something which I messed up saying there. We want you to be able to express and justify your ideas. We want you to live a safe, a healthy, fulfilling lives, and we want you to be able to communicate in a foreign language. At the end of the day, at the end of hopefully when you leave us in the 6th form, it's about leaving us as a responsible citizen, you know, so you make a contribution, a real positive contribution to society, that you're aware of different cultures, you have a good understanding of the world and the place of yourself and the country and the global community. That's what we're about here at the Willink. We tailor our curriculum to the students. Year 9, next year's year 10, is a very able cohort. So, and about 90% of our students are deemed, if it was a national cohort, 90% of our students would be deemed middle or upper ability. So we are skewed in that way, okay, and our curriculum has to reflect that. A bit about results. Well, the last set of results we had, which were nationally gauged, of course, was 2019. And we were in the top 10% of similar schools with similar intake of students. So our curriculum has to reflect that. As such, we have a core curriculum of English and maths and sciences, at least a double science, a humanities and a language, and that is suitable for the vast majority of our students. If it's not quite suitable, then we do have individual conversations with students, and that will happen over the next few months. More about that later. Like I said at the outset, we do have students that join us every year from other schools wanting to join the Willink and what we can offer. Equally, we occasionally have students that may go elsewhere, occasionally to UTC in Reading or Newbury College. And what I would say is, if you are considering that, and very few, like 1 or 2 each year do, but if you do talk to us, okay? It's really important that all the advice and guidance and information is out there to support you in this sort of decision. Okay, so next slide, please. So a little bit more. So that was the sort of the aims bit, wasn't it? So what does this curriculum look like in practice? Well, we want you to have a breadth of curriculum. It's all about, like I said a minute ago, really about keeping the doors open, So we need to have a breadth of the curriculum, a core curriculum and an options curriculum. And Mr. Collot will talk about that in a little bit as well. We need a balance, which means you have your science and your humanities and your arts and your technology and your creative arts. You have that balance, okay? And you can specialize a little bit as well. So you could do 2 languages, or you could do 2 humanities, or whatever. We need to have that balance of the curriculum, okay, keeping those doors open. We need to make certain it's relevant. So we need to make certain that the areas of learning, you know, your knowledge, your understanding, your values and attitudes, areas of learning, practical elements are relevant to the course and relevant to you, relevant to adult life. So actually we also inject the curriculum with curriculum information, advice and guidance and how to work with money and mental health and all this sort of thing. That's all part of the curriculum, not necessarily the examined curriculum, but it's all in there somewhere as well. We need to make certain it's differentiated and challenged. Whatever your ability, we need to make certain the curriculum is differentiated. Now that means that the most stable are extended, and those that needing more structure and more scaffolding in their learning is done through the curriculum. So we might have higher ability groups and middle ability groups. We don't have low ability groups, so we might differentiate according to groups. But within classes as well, teachers will differentiate and make certain that you are learning and learning to your potential and extending your learning. Progress and continuity, another curriculum principle. This is where you learn a bit at Key Stage 3 in geography, whatever it is, and then in Year 10 in geography, you carry on developing those principles and skills. And then into the sixth form if you were to take geography again. So there's that progression in syllabus, the progression in continuity in learning. One building block is added to the one before, and it's really important that our schemes of work that teachers develop have that continuity in learning, right from Year 9 now all the way up to Year 12 and 13. Coherence, which really means that all the bits are sort of fitting together. So if you're learning, I don't know, about plate tectonics in geography, how does that fit in with the science element of the natural world, of the physical world? So we try and fit that together. And then the final bit is about finances, which is an odd one, isn't it? There are 7 bits here. What's the finance bit is? When it comes to options, we do reserve the right to not run some courses sometimes. Now, I can't remember when this happened last, but clearly if only 2 students in the entire Year 9 want to study history next year, and I can imagine that that would be the case, it's not a very interesting subject. Let's say if 2 students only wanted to do history, then we wouldn't be able to run it, and Miss Harbidge and so on, Mr. Size would have to teach PE instead. A sight for sore eyes, I know what you're saying. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you, Mr. Whitty. So, 10 seconds on this one then. This core curriculum is designed around what is called the English Baccalaureate, which is not a certificate that you get, but it is a measure of that core curriculum. So the vast majority, when I say that, 95% of you will do 2 English Lit, mathematics, at least 2 sciences, more about that in later, at least 1 language, more about that a bit later, and either history or geography. And that breadth of core, which is odd, kind of breadth and a core, but that breadth really gives the building blocks to you and keeping your doors open to further education into the sixth form. Okay. Mr. Whitty has whittled on. I will now pass over to Mr. Collot, who I think is going to take on the next stage. Thank you.
Again, good evening all. I'm going to now take you through the various subjects we study at GCSE level and through the actual process of choosing your options. So you've got in front of you the list of the core subjects that almost all students will be studying: English language and English lit, maths, double science. I will come back and talk to you a bit later about triple science, PSRE, which is a combination of PSHE and RE, core PE. There is also the possibility to do GCSE PE, which involves some theory, 1 foreign language that students currently study. Again, there is an option to carry on with the second foreign language as an option. And finally, either history or geography. But again, there is a possibility to study both, 1 being an option. Next slide, please. So these are all the options we offer, and you will be able in the Q&A to speak to all the heads of department for these options. Note that for the second foreign language, it could be either German, Spanish or French. Next slide, please. So this is the process we've been through and that students are aware of. We've had assemblies starting in October, remote assemblies, where students have been able to see a video during tutor time from all the option subjects. These videos are available to watch again if students or you parents wish to as well. There's a link on the website to access all these videos. Tonight we're having our Year 9 option evening. Next week and the week after, we've got our Parents' Evening, which will be remote, as you are, I'm sure, aware. On School Cloud, you should have received a communication and email about School Cloud. So if you haven't booked your appointments yet for the evening, please do so. If you've got any issues with the booking, please contact us and we'll get back to you. And we are choosing options online. So the window to choose your options is between Friday the 12th of Feb to Friday the 26th. So by that time, you will have had Parents' Evening, whether you TU, VW or XYZ. We will send an email to students explaining how to make the choices online. And we will have a remote assembly as well during Rise and Shine, during tutor time, which will also be recorded. So you can also watch and see how we make the choices. I will also now take you through how to make the choices. It's very easy. Next slide, please. So the first choice that you are asked to make is between history and geography, and then you choose your language. Next slide, please. So, for example, if I want to do geography and obviously I want to study French, this is what would happen when you click on them. You can always change your mind at any time, and you can always go back to your account and make changes within the window of the 12th to the 26th of Feb. Next slide, please. You then choose two options, and we'll also ask you to choose two reserves. It's very likely that you will have to study your reserve subjects, but we do need you to choose two here as well, please. Next slide, please. So, for instance, if I want to study art and media for my options, I will just click on them basically, and you can see that they appear in blue. And then business and drama would be, for instance, my reserve, and you can see they appear in a different color as well on the screen. And then next slide. When you've completed everything, you've got a summary page where you can see the choices you've made. And as I said, if you're not happy with what you've made, you can make changes, and you can also get back to the system to make them at a later stage. Next slide, please. So Mr. Fry has mentioned these 2 points really, and as Mr. Fry said, it hasn't happened a lot in the last 10 years that we were not able to offer students exactly what they wanted, but the order of priority could matter. So when you do choose the options, make sure you think about which one you really want to do, and then choose the next one. And small classes, again, that hasn't happened a lot at all in the I can't remember any time when it happened actually, but you do need to be aware that we could have to not run a course if we don't have enough students. Thank you. Next slide, please. Yes, I will now hand over to Mr. Jubb.
Good evening, thanks for joining us. Mr. Ballantyne, if I could have the next slide, please, that'd be great.
All ready for you, Mr. Jubb.
My screen's just showing that it's still, there we go. So first and foremost, think carefully about your choices. Make sure that you consider them thoroughly. Only in extreme cases will changes be allowed. So the groups are likely to be pretty full, and therefore if you have chosen the wrong subject and you then want to change that to something different, it can be really difficult. So really consider exactly what it is you want to study, and make sure that you make the right choice as best you can. As it says there, no changes will be allowed under any circumstances after the end of September. So again, just reiterating that point of making the correct choices in the first place if you can. Next slide, please, sir. So how to choose? I'm sure lots of you will already have a pretty good idea of the subjects that you would like to choose, but if you're still not sure, the top two are a really good place to start. So what do you enjoy? What subjects do you really enjoy? If you enjoy it, you're more likely than not going to work hard at it, and you're going to make good progress in it, and you're going to obviously enjoy it and do as well as you can. The next question, what are you good at? So yes, you might enjoy it, but actually, like I said earlier, if you enjoy it, you're going to study it more, and therefore you're going to get better at it as well. You're going to get some satisfaction when you do well. You might also start to think about what career you have in mind. Now, I would suggest a lot of you in Year 9 probably haven't got a great idea in terms of what you might want to do for a career. And that's where Mrs. Desai comes in, our careers advisor, and there'll be a bit of a Q&A at 7:35, and you can also book appointments. So start to think about what career you might like to go into. Again, it might be based around those two questions, so what you enjoy and what you're good at. The next bit is quite difficult to do at the minute, I guess. So finding out about the subjects and speaking to your teachers, because you're not in school, not as easy as it would normally be. But there are still ways of doing that. You can obviously email your teachers and speak to them that way. Just sort of, oh, I'm not really sure about this or this. What would you suggest? Equally, you may have contact details for some current Year 10s, current Year 11s, and you might choose to pick up the phone and have a conversation with them and see what they would recommend, see what the subjects are actually like once they've started them. Obviously, there's also the booklet, and hopefully you have seen that already. It's on the school website, but it's also been emailed out as well. But that kind of looks at the expectations of each subject, what you will need to, what areas you will study, and that side of things. And lastly, try not to choose your options based on your teacher, because the teacher may well be different next year. Make sure you're choosing it because you enjoy the subject, because you like the subject, because you're good at the subject. Okay, next slide, please, sir. As Monsieur Collot mentioned earlier, the key dates are that we have our parents' evenings next Thursday and the following Thursday. Our window then opens for the online applications on Friday the 12th, and you have 2 weeks to make your decision. And at that point, I'm going to hand you back over to Mr. Ballantyne.
Thanks very much, Mr. Jubb. Thank you, Mr. Collot, as well. We've got a few minutes before the live Q&A starts at 6:30. There may be a slight delay from us broadcasting to you receiving it, but I can assure you we are starting it on time and keeping to that schedule. So 5 minutes after each one is when it will start. We've got a few questions that have come in so far, and I'm going to ask Mr. Collot if you can help me to answer some of these. We don't have science in tonight because everyone has to take science, but a common question is, can I study triple science? What is triple science? How does it differ to the core science? Monsieur Collot, could you answer that one for us?
Yes, I can. So yes, you can study triple science. What we would ask students to do is to talk to their science teachers about that and see if it's the right thing for them, bearing in mind a couple of things. Really, it's a great subject, but you do need to be aware that it means that you will end up studying a lot of science, because you already have in core science 12 periods per fortnight, and if you do choose it as an option, that adds another 6, so 18 periods over 60. That's nearly a third of your time studying science. So you do have to be absolutely passionate about it. And you do need to be aware as well that you don't actually need to study triple science in order to study sciences, whether it's biology, chemistry, or physics at A level. So that's the things to consider. But do speak to your teachers, email them individually to see if it's the right thing for you.
I'm on mute, aren't I? Thanks, Mr. Collot. I've got a question here about PE. Mr. Jubb, this is to you. What sort of compulsory PE do students do in year 10 if they don't choose it as an option?
So they'll get two lessons of PE a week, which will be all practical. The areas that they'll have a look at are pretty similar to the ones that they'll look at during Key Stage 3. So they will do the usual sort of basics, your footballs, your rugbies, your basketballs, your netballs, your badmintons, your hockey, all of that sort of stuff. But we also add in some fitness elements in there in terms of obviously not at the moment, but generally we would go into the gym within the Willink Leisure Centre and have some sessions in there in year 11. So they get a bit more variety in that respect, but essentially the same activities as lower down the school.
Thank you, Mr. Jubb. Here is a really important question, which I'm going to put to you, Mr. Collot. How many lessons do I get for each subject at year 10 compared to year 9?
Okay, so if we look at the cycle, as in the fortnight, which is 60 lessons in total, you would get in year 10 8 lessons of English, 9 lessons of math, 12 lessons of science, 6 lessons of languages. Same for options, so 3 options, 3 lots of 6, 4 lessons of core PE, 3 lessons of RE. I have not mentioned PSHE because students do not study PSHE in year 10, it starts in year 11. So that's the 60 lessons for the cycle.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got another one here, which is, will I get a lot of homework? How does the homework change from year 9 through to GCSE?
So the homework schedule is published on the website, but basically for core subjects, you would get about 3 to 3.5 hours of homework per week. And for option 1 hour per option, so again 3 options, so that's 3 hours. So in total 6 to 6.5. Now you do need to bear in mind that for some students 6 to 6.5 could be 3, and for some others it could be 12 really. So you do need to again talk to teachers if you find that your children are spending 12 hours per week on homework, because it's probably too much and they need to know when to stop really. But that's the sort of average we try to reach.
And I think it's fair to say as well that I forgot what I was going to say. I had a brain freeze there. Here, I'll just go on to the next question. Maybe it will pop back into my head. Can I study 2 technologies or 2 artistic subjects at the same time?
Well, they're not technically exactly at the same time, but you can study 2 technologies or 2 arts. So you do choose either history or geography, you do choose a foreign language, and then the choice is completely yours for the next 2 options that you're going to choose. So you can study art and music, or music and drama, or art and drama. You can also equally study food and DT, food and textile and DT. That's absolutely fine. We do tend to have 2 groups in some of these subjects, so it's not a problem to timetable it.
I remembered what I was going to say now, and that was that some of these questions that we will are answered at when you join year 10. We'll have a parent information evening, and there's more specific getting started with GCSE hosted by Mr. Sizer and the head of year 10. Question, can I study a subject at A level if I didn't study at a GCSE level? I can probably take that question. And the answer is, in most cases, absolutely, yes. I think we had a student study art at A level that hadn't done it at GCSE. I mean, there are cases where I think if you wanted to do all 3 sciences at or 2 sciences at A level, it is probably important to do triple science at GCSE. You're bound to anyway, because you're going to be passionate about the subject. One more here. Someone's asked on the chat, why do students need to choose reserve subjects? I think we covered that off, that in the vast majority of cases, we work really, really hard to make sure that you get your first subjects. But just in case there is an oversubscription to one particular subject, and it hasn't happened certainly in the 8 years that I've been here, then we may need to ask you to go to the reserve. But we absolutely do our best to make sure that you get your first subjects. It is now 6:30, which means that we need to stick to schedule. Waiting in the wings of a very fine castle is Mrs. Harbidge, our head of history. Good evening, Mrs. Harbidge. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. I have some questions for you from our students and from parents about history. What topics do you cover at GCSE history?
So the GCSE, there's no coursework. We do 4 modules. So we do Germany from just before the First World War through to the end of the Second World War. So it's the fall of the Kaiser, the Weimar period, and then the rise and the fall of the Nazis, which is absolutely fascinating. We then do the history of medicine, which is so relevant to what we're doing, well, the world today, talking about COVID and vaccinations. And so we study medicine from the early medieval period all the way through to the modern day. And we look at the rise and fall and how does it go from,
that's what they can see.
Oh, somebody's
Well, I can't.
it's Valentine, I can hear you.
Sorry, Mrs. Harbidge.
It's quite right. I just didn't want. Yes. So we look at how, the history of medicine. How does it go from you have a sore leg, so they'll just cut it off, through to the development of medicines and germ theory and vaccinations. Huge thing on vaccinations. And it's so relevant. The Russian media at the moment is comparing the Oxford vaccine to being made of chimpanzees, so you'll become a chimpanzee if you have it. It's utter fake news, but we'll be looking at the origins of that. The third topic is the Korea and Vietnam Wars, 2 absolutely fascinating and horrible, but really, really interesting wars. And it's the Cold War at its absolute height. And then the Normans. And if you know me, you know my absolute love of the Normans. So right back to the medieval period, the conquest of Britain. I'm teaching at the moment with year 11. It's fantastic. I'm going to be creating little reenactments of the Battle of Hastings with Lego this weekend. Castles, the church. It's, we've got 4 really different but very interesting topics. And the skills are just layered all the way through them. So, yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Harbidge. I'm going to blame Mr. Fry for that technical interruption as I move on to the second question. How does history help in the future? How will it help people with their careers in the future?
Not only will we have learned content that actually history repeats itself, and so we'll see how it repeats itself and how we can learn from the mistakes of the past, but actually the skills are so important. The skills of analysis, pulling things apart, arguing, testing things and evaluating. Is that accurate? Can we trust it? Is it reliable? What does it teach us? The ability to actually take lots of information and pull out the relevant bits. They are skills that employers want. I used to work at the civil service and they loved my history degree because they could give me a big wad of information. I could pull out the relevant bits and make use of it. And the skills we teach you will be relevant whether you do sciences in the future, whether you stay in maths, whether you go into construction, whatever you choose to do. The skills history teach you will be so relevant to any future career, but also just for life.
Thank you, Mrs. Harbidge. And another question here, what trips do students get to go on?
Oh,
in normal times, I should say.
Yes, in normal times, we go to Berlin. So it's a joint trip with the German department. And we spend 4, we're trying to increase it to 5 when we're allowed to go, in Berlin, at the heart of Germany. And we can study the history of Germany there. We go to a concentration camp, which is really very sobering. We go to this amazing museum, which is the history of Germany in a museum. You can see Hitler's desk, very, very large for a very short man. Absolutely brilliant trip, and because it's with the German department, we go to the zoo, see the pandas, practice our German, but actually we just explore German history. But actually they've got a brilliant museum about medicine, which we try to go to. We go to we want to go to the topography of terror. We go to the Olympic Stadium, which for football fans is where, actually I can't remember the name of the football team that plays there, but the Berlin Olympic Stadium, because it was built for the Nazi Olympics, but actually we learn so much and it's really fun to go around. I have run so many trips in my career, and hands down, every single time the Berlin trip comes out on top. It is utterly, utterly worth it. So if you do history or you do German, or preferably both, because then you get your top of the pile, you can come on the Berlin trip, and it's brilliant.
Mrs. Harvage, thank you very much. Our time is up at 6:35. We say goodbye to you and we page into Mr. Burgess, Head of Geography. Mr. Burgess, are you receiving us?
I am. Hopefully I am, I think. Yeah, hopefully you're receiving me.
Loud and clear, thank you. So first question on geography. Can you give a brief overview of what topics are covered in geography? He's frozen. Mr. Burgess seems like he potentially is frozen. Let me try and send him live again. This could be a... Can you see it live?
Oh, yeah, he's back.
Mr. Burgess, you're back. Yeah. The question was, yeah, we had a technical issue there. What topics are covered at GCSE?
So a huge variety of topics we cover at GCSE, from your kind of your basic rivers and coasts kind of physical geography through to so
I think we've got a technical issue with Mr. Burgess. I think perhaps his broadband isn't quite coming through. We've got a couple of other questions here, which I might just general questions, which I might just go to, and then we'll see if we can get we can carry on. Mr. Burgess is still there? All right, I'll send you live again and see if this works. Okay. Off you go, Mr. Burgess. Oh, he's not unmuting now. Can you just unmute Mr. Burgess? No, we've got real issues, I'm afraid, with Mr. Burgess. I do apologise. So let's see if we can go to Mrs. Edney, who's not expecting to be live until 6:40. Mrs. Edney, are you there? She is there. Excellent. Smiling. That's nice to see a friendly face in this technical disaster. If you unmute yourself, please, Mrs. Edney.
Good evening. Hi.
Good evening.
Hello.
So languages. First question, can I study French and Spanish?
Yes, we're really excited this year. Up until now, for a good few years, you've been able to do French and German, or Spanish and German, but now we're allowed, if you are studying French and Spanish in year 9, that was a new option last year for when you were all in year 8. You can now do Spanish and French as well. So as long as you're studying those 2 languages in year 9, those are the 2 languages that you are allowed to choose.
How many hours do students have in a typical 2-week timetable for languages?
So it's 6 periods over the 2 weeks, which adds up to 5 hours of language learning. If you decide to do a second language, for example, German or Spanish or French as your second language, you would do an additional 6 periods over the fortnight.
And what sort of topics are studied in languages? How's it like different to Key Stage 3? How does the GCSE course work?
So it kind of works across 3 themes. So there are 3 key themes. The first theme is identity and culture. The second is the local, national, international and global areas of interest. And the third theme is education and future employment. So within those kind of themes, you will study topics you're already familiar with, such as describing family, free time, but then there will be additional, more challenging units and topics such as social issues, healthy eating, homelessness, the environment, and holidays, and where you live as well. So we are going to be revisiting some topics you may already know at a higher level, of course, not at the same level as year 7 and 8 and a little bit of year 9, but actually we're also going to be learning some new really controversial, interesting topics as well.
And someone's asked, is it hard studying 2 languages? And I'm assuming they don't mean English and French. I'm assuming they mean like French and Spanish, or how hard is it?
I think what we say, and it is true, and I remember my German teacher telling me this when I was in year 9, because when she convinced me to do 2 languages, was actually the more languages you learn, the easier it gets, because you can when you start to understand grammar concepts in one language, they're normally very similar in the others, because obviously French, Spanish and German have the same foundations, or there are differences of course, but there's a lot that we can learn from each of those languages. And obviously content and language aside, you also will be very familiar with the exam, how the exam is run. So once you know how to sit the Spanish exam, how it's structured, the mark schemes are the same across the languages. So actually, once you get to know and learn the exam and the mark scheme for one language, well, you know it for the second as well. So actually, there's a lot of synergies between the 2.
And final question, Ms. Sedney, how much homework is there? What kind of homework do language students get?
Okay, so obviously everyone's used to getting learning and doing homework. That's how we describe it in Key Stage 3. That does continue. So very much in terms of the structure of the homework, it's the same. You will obviously have more. So you will have more words to learn when you're doing your learning homework. And with your doing homework, it will be a piece of work that takes a little bit longer as well, and probably will increase in complexity. So in terms of routine and structure, it's pretty the same. It's just that you will have a little bit more of everything.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Edney. I'm going to put up on the screen here, this was our planned schedule for the subject Q&A. Unfortunately, the technical difficulties of reaching Mr. Burgess have meant that we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, so we'll just keep going as we were. So I'm hoping then that means that Mrs. Hobbs, I'm going to go to you next, our head of art this year. Mrs. Hobbs, are you receiving us?
Good evening.
Excellent. Thinking about art, Mrs. Hobbs, a question that's come in. What's the ratio of coursework to exam in GCSE art?
Okay, so the joy of art and design is that we offer a course that is 60% coursework and 40% exam. Through both components of work, that is mainly done within the classroom. So the coursework itself will take part in both lesson time and homework allocation, and then the exam unit starts in the February of year 11. But again, the preparatory work to that is done in class with the teacher, working towards the 10-hour exam that's around May time.
And what does the coursework involve in art?
So we offer an unendorsed course, so it's art, craft and design. So within that, students will experience a variety of different disciplines and skills, ranging from photography, 3D clay work, wire, printing, painting, textiles. And the idea being is that students are exposed to a variety of different disciplines, so that they are able to take that and towards the exam unit play to their strengths.
What career opportunities does having an art GCSE lead to?
So typically at the Willink, we have seen students go down the career pathways in terms of architecture, fashion design, buying and merchandising, visual merchandising, interior design. So they're perhaps the sort of key areas that we have seen students go on to. At the moment, the UK industry and the creative industry, sorry, in the UK is massively expanding. We're such a digital age now where visual communication is really key. And that's something we're keen to promote within the department. So whether it's with our centre at GCSE or A level, the subject works really well in terms of product design as well as media studies.
And what is it that you would say that students really love about doing GCSE art? Why is it a subject that they should pick?
There's sort of two caveats to it. The students that perhaps have perhaps the more literacy heavy academic subjects that enjoy doing art and design as more of a release and a therapy in itself. And then there are those that are looking to go into the career pathway that love engaging with creative activities, whether that be more hands-on messy work or whether that be something more refined and tailored. But it's one of those subjects that you are able to express yourself in a multitude of different ways. That again, like I say, students can play to their strengths, and there's a little something for everybody. It isn't always about technical drawing, for instance, and realism.
Mrs. Hobbs, thanks very much. We're going to move on to our next subject. I'm going to pass you over to Mr. Collot, who's going to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Collot, and we are 5 minutes ahead of schedule for the subject Q&A that's on the website.
So we are now moving to DT. Good evening, Mr. Downing. Thanks for being early.
Good evening.
So the first question we have on the chat for you, or the Q&A, is what are the various units of the course, please?
So in the GCSE, what we do a term or so where you do quite a heavy practical focus, which is on mechanisms, materials, just giving you an understanding of how we build things. And then we start to look more at designing in the second and third term, so customers and loads more of the more specialized processes, so engineering. And then in the end, we basically do one giant exam board set task that takes a good few months, but is very free, and you're able to do whatever you like within the setting that the exam board gives us.
Okay. And could you tell us a little bit more about the coursework and how much it's worth, please?
So the coursework is around about 50% of the exam, 50-50, so 50% coursework, 50% exam. And the coursework is a 20-page PowerPoint with a huge made project that you photograph, you design, you do all the various computer-aided renderings for, and then eventually make. Alongside that, the exam is about a single 2-hour exam, which covers the history of design, manufacturing processes and material theory, and also about 15% of it is mathematical. So engineering and the maths that comes into play in design there.
Okay, thank you very much. How well do students perform? I'm sure you're going to tell us amazingly well.
Historically, for the last four years, we've had 80% or there around, getting 9 to 4 grades. So we do pretty well with our students.
Very good. What sort of careers could you do after studying D&T? What could it lead to, please?
Very, very open range of options. It's really useful if you need a portfolio or to show your ability to be able to design. So that could take you towards architecture, but it's also excellent if you just want to show an understanding of materials for something like engineering or product design. We've had students go on to do construction management, set design, and obviously the full range of media, advertising, and so on and so forth.
Thank you very much. And in terms of after GCSEs, can we do DT at A level?
See, this is where I think my subject's really good, because actually it gives you a route into A level with the product design, which is great. And it also gives you a good experience of product design. They link straight in. You get to learn some of the more advanced skills that we start to touch on at GCSE, but you really get to blossom in at A level. We also offer, we don't offer, but the the lead is very good for getting into apprenticeships, for example, in engineering and those sorts of areas where you may actually need to prove that you have an interest in engineering to get onto an engineering apprenticeship. And if you've got something you've made, that's a really good route for getting into those sorts of environments as well.
Okay, one final question from the Q&A. If you do choose to study DT, do you study food and textile as well, or is it just DT?
GCSE, it is just product design. I think most of year 9 will have done, so it's the woodwork, for want of a better word, the metal work, the plastics work, as well as all of the electronics and the engineering that we do. Textiles can be brought in, but we don't study much. We don't study food at all.
Thank you very much. We shall now be moving to textiles. Miss Ronsi, can you hear me? Good evening.
Good evening.
So we've got a few questions for you, similar questions actually, in terms of coursework. How much is the coursework worth for textile, please?
The coursework in textiles is 60%, and then we have 40% exam, which is a fully practical exam with 3 days worth of exam.
Okay, and in terms of lessons, how many theory lessons do we do? How many practical lessons do we do?
Pretty much 100% is practical lessons. We do research on designers, and then we will use that research to do responses and create our own work from that.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further education opportunities at the Willink?
We do provide a A-level art and design course in which, if students want to go into textiles, they can specialise in more textile related mediums.
Okay, thank you. And after that, where can that all take me in terms of careers, please?
So there's a number of different careers that you can go into. Fashion design, textile design, sportswear designer. You can go into things like illustration, graphics, print design, which could even go into the print design for money, perhaps. There's so many different areas. You learn so many different skills that are really applicable to so many different industries. And you'll learn things about problem solving, which will go into many different areas.
Okay, thank you. We've got more question about coursework. What does it involve, the coursework, please?
So the coursework involves doing 2 projects. So one is focused on butterflies and bugs and beetles. And in this, we'll learn about 3 different designers. So we'll look at the techniques that they use, and we will learn how to do those techniques. So people like Alexander McQueen, we'll look at the ways that they use different techniques to produce their garments, and the students will learn these and apply these within their projects. So we tried to stay really contemporary with what we teach.
Okay, I've got a final question about exams. How are students assessed? And we've got a specific question about if you are choosing art and textile, as they are long exams, can you do both and have have a 10-hour exam really in the end? Is that possible?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
The question about exams, how are you assessed in textiles? I'll ask you the next bit after. Okay,
so you're assessed based on your sketchbook. So there are 4 different criteria you need to fulfill. So it will be a lot to do with your researching skills, your development skills, your ability to refine your work and then develop it into a final piece. So you'll be assessed on each of these different criteria.
Okay, thank you very much. We are now moving to food, nutrition and preparation with Mr. Miles.
Hello there, how are you?
Hello, very good, thank you. So the most interesting subject, definitely. So similar questions I just muted myself. Sorry, that's why you can't hear me. That's all right. Yes, in terms of practical lessons, how many practical lessons, how often do we actually cook compared to the theory lessons?
Yeah, so in year 10, students will be cooking at least once a week, and then they also do a combination of theory lessons as well. I'd say that in year 10, the practical lessons are much more intense. In year 11, the students will still cook, but they'll be actually doing a project which will require them to do a 3-hour practical assessment at one point during the year.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the theory lesson, is there a lot of food science involved?
Yes. So just to make that quite clear, actually, part of the food and nutrition GCSE does carry a fair amount of food science. So if you enjoy science as a subject as well, you'll find that this subject really does complement that in terms of that understanding of nutrition and how that impacts the body.
Okay, thank you. We've got an interesting question here about what sort of food students will be cooking.
Yeah, so what I can reveal is that the course does allow a very varied approach to making different products. We look at international cuisine, so really looking at different cultures and the foods that are made there. We also look at patisserie work, which is one of my personal favourites. We also look at how we can tailor a menu towards different dietary requirements, such as the elderly or an athlete. So that part is really interesting for the students to gain that understanding.
Okay, we've got a question about French food. Do you study any French food? I'm not going to lie, it's not from the Q&A, it's a personal question.
Yes, we do touch upon French cuisine, along with other cuisines as well.
Very good.
There are profiteroles being made in year 10, which always go down a storm. So
okay, just make sure you inform me when that happens. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We shall now be moving to drama. Miss Ross
not there, so
is not here yet, so we will move then to music. Mrs. Lawrence, sorry, we'll be a bit early, but you can see you there. So
hello.
So first question from, oh, actually, yeah, first question from the chat. Do I need to be able to play a musical instrument?
You do need to be able to play a musical instrument. However, the definition of a musical instrument is quite broad when it comes to GCSE. So obviously traditional instruments, flutes, clarinets, violins, piano are really popular, but we also have a lot of singers who do very well in GCSE music. Also, the course is really relevant if you use music technology. So if you like to compose and perform music using technology and software on your computer, then you can also use that as your instrument. Popular instruments like drums, electric guitar, electric bass, all absolutely fine as well. If you are a rapper, you can use that as your instrument, and if you DJ, you can use that as your instrument as well. So it's really open to a huge variety of different styles of music and styles of instruments.
Excellent. And do you need to have taken any grades for all these instruments? Any qualifications?
You don't need to have taken any grades at all, no. The kind of standard that students are performing at is really wide and really varied. I would say if you've got grade 3 or above, that's great, and that's going to put you in a really great place to access the performance, but you definitely do not need to have taken those grades. And if you have any worries about whether your standard as a musician is good enough or not, then just come along and chat to one of your music teachers, get us to have a little listen, and we're more than happy to let you know whether we think your standard is good enough for the course.
Thank you very much. Talking about worries, we had a question about performing in class. Will I have to perform in front of the whole class?
It is a performance-based subject, and you will be asked to perform, not necessarily always by yourself and not necessarily every lesson, but definitely across the 2 years of GCSE there will be lessons where you are expected to perform, sometimes alone, sometimes with a group of people, but we'll work on confidence, and if you don't feel confident enough to do that at the beginning, then we will explore ways of kind of helping you get through that and developing your confidence so that you are able to perform later on in the course.
Okay, could you take us through the topics that we will be studying in music?
Yeah, sure. So we study a really wide variety of musical topics. So we look at classical music, Baroque, classical, romantic musics and all the key features of those. We then move on to popular music. So we study blues, rock anthems, popular music from solo singers, popular ballads. We then look at world music, so we look at samba drumming, music from the Caribbean, we look at African drumming, we look at Bhangra music and Indian classical music, and then we look at film and game music, so how music is written for film and for gaming as well.
Okay, sounds very exciting. Question about assessment though now, how all that is assessed, please?
Yeah, so it's much like all the other creative subjects, it's 60% coursework and 40% exam. So the exam covers listening questions based on all of those areas of study that I just spoke about. So you'll be played extracts of music and you'll be asked to answer questions about the music you hear. The 60% coursework is 40% performance and 40% composition. So you have to do 2 performances and 30% for both of those, and then 2 compositions, which is where you write your own pieces of music. You get an opportunity to write a piece of free composition, so you choose what you want to write. If you are a singer, you can write a song. If you play a classical instrument, you can write a piece of classical music. And the other composition is set to a brief, so you get given a brief and you have to compose a piece of music to fit that brief. The performances, you do 1 solo performance and 1 ensemble performance, so that's where you perform as a group of people.
Thank you very much. I was going to let you off the hook, but we've got another 2 questions which have just appeared. So okay. Do you need to be able to fluently read music to take the subject as an option?
No, you don't. It is helpful if you can read music, and definitely the music reading that we cover throughout years 7, 8 and 9 is really handy. So you'll probably have quite a good basic understanding from Key Stage 3. We will look at reading music as part of the course, but you don't need to be able to read it fluently in order to access the course at all.
Thank you. Final question now, I promise. Will the work be more practical than your 9 lessons? Will we use instruments more?
Yes, so one of the really great things about GCSE music is that the classes tend to be smaller, so usually about 15 or 16 students in a class. You are in a class with other musicians, so there's a really great opportunity to get together as musicians and perform on your own instruments. So students often bring their own instruments into class. We've got a variety of ukuleles and guitars and drums that we often get out and often use at GCSE music. So there's definitely more of an opportunity for ensemble performing and performing using a bigger variety of instruments once you get to GCSE, yes.
Thank you very much for all these answers. I will now pass over to Mr. Jubb for the next subject, which will be drama.
Thank you, Monsieur Collot. I'm hoping that Miss Ross is now here, so hopefully we can hear you, Miss Ross. Are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Awesome. Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect.
Thank you. We'll start with the first question. How many practical lessons are there?
So we have 6 lessons of drama a fortnight, which is a major increase from 1 a week, and 5 of them over the fortnight are practical in year 10, and there's 1 theory, and then in year 11 that changes to 2 theory and 4 practical.
Excellent, thank you very much. Second question, how much acting do we do?
So in those lessons, in the practical lessons, from the very beginning of year 10, we do a lot of workshop based lessons. So there's sort of performance right from the beginning, but the actual assessment is there's sort of 3 main assessments in year 10, just to get a flavour of all the different styles that we teach. And then in year 11, there are 2 main components that are assessed. One is a devised piece that you work with the group and you create a piece of performance and perform that. And then you do a scripted performance, which can be a small piece with 2 people, could be up to 4 actors. And so therefore, if you want to do acting, there is a huge amount of opportunity for that in there, in all lessons, but also in our assessments.
Great, that sounds good. Next question, can I just do design?
So lots of people now are choosing GCSE drama because they want to do design. And yes, in assessments, you 100% can specialise. You could do lighting, you could do sound, you could do set and props or costume and makeup. Or what we advise people to do in year 10 is to try them out in the assessments so that you're having a go at learning all of those skills. And then in year 11, specialise in what you think you're going to get the best mark in. But also you have to, even if you are going to be assessed as an actor, you have to understand all of the design elements because they come into the written paper. But equally, designers need to understand the acting in order to be able to write about that in their written paper as well.
Excellent. I've just had a question come in. If you take drama to make props and design props, do you have to act?
So you don't have, so in lessons, at the very beginning, it's really good because the class is relatively small and they're all people who've chosen it together. We will expect some participation in the workshops, but as soon as we get to sort of the October, maybe sort of middle of October of the first year, then we will be putting them into assessment groups. So that's the point at which, if you want to, you can do, in terms of the example you gave us, props. So set design and props go together. If that's what you want to do, then you can, from that point, all the assessment, you will work with a group of actors. They will be rehearsing and you'll be making the props and designing the set and making a set box and things sort of to go with it. So yes, you can focus all on design, but actually it's really good for you to take part in the practical workshops early on. It's good confidence building, and it's also good to be able to write about it in the exam.
Excellent. And just talking about that exam, what plays do you study?
So we will be studying a brilliant play called DNA by Dennis Kelly. It's about a group of teenagers who get into quite terrible trouble and they try to get themselves out of it by making some very bad decisions. It's completely accessible, and we often in year 10 like to do a performance for parents, because obviously a lot of what we do is assessment, so we tend not to have parents in to see that, but we have a really nice evening in about the June of year 10 where we have a go at our set text, which is DNA, and we perform it for the parents. So it's a good way to sort of show off and to perform for your parents. But equally, if you want to do design, the designers then sort of work and we sort of create our own sort of theatre company working together towards that.
Excellent. And another question coming through live is what are the exams like?
So the exams are, so we do exams in year 7, 8 and 9, which is kind of a taste of it. Basically, the actual written paper, so we study DNA, so you will know the play inside and out. You'll know how to write about it from an acting perspective. You'll know how to write about it from design. And basically the questions are really guided. And for example, you might get a question saying, so the character of Leah in scene 1, what costume should she wear? And you would have to explain that costume. You don't have to draw it, you just have to write an explanation. You might be asked how to use lighting and sound to create atmosphere. You might be asked how an actor should perform a page of text, in which case you break it down and you give examples. There is also a really nice section of the exam where we look at live theatre. So we'll have watched currently recorded live theatre, but you can watch live theatre and you write a review. So what you loved about it, what you've learnt about drama over the 2 years, you get to write about it in that exam as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Next question, how big are the classes?
So they tend to be between 15 and 20. 20 is our maximum because that's the drama classroom where we have our theory lessons can fit 20 people comfortably at desks. So beyond that, it wouldn't work. And also in the drama studio, when we're doing practical work, then we want to be able to have a nice sort of rehearsal space for your group. So we tend to have 3 or 4 groups at any one time, be able to use a quarter or a third of the studio, but sometimes down to 15. It all depends on how many people apply, how many classes we have, but it's lovely. We're going basically down from 30 down to 15, and all the people in there have chosen this subject because they love to perform or design, and they have a desire to create theatre. So it's an amazing, lovely environment with a really small group of people.
Great, and just the last question for you.
Yeah.
How will this help me in future careers?
So with this, I would say you obviously could be taking GCSE drama because you have an ambition to be on the stage or be in films, and so you might take this as your first step towards that and then go on to study A-level drama, or perhaps go and do a BTEC performing arts at a college. You might then go into drama school, etc. But you can take it a different route. You could perhaps look at the sort of design side or the stage management side of theatre. There are jobs in the theatre, a huge range of them, but equally I would say that all of my drama students leave the course being confident at speaking in front of people. They're great in interviews, and lots of our past GCSE students have gone on to be head girl and head boy, I would say, so very good at speaking publicly. That's great. Thanks ever so much, Mrs. Ross. That's fine. And we're now going to move on to creative iMedia and media with Mrs. Close. Mrs. Close, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Great. We're going to start with creative iMedia. Well, it's kind of a bit of both really, but what's the difference between iMedia and GCSE media?
Okay, so this is the question we get asked lots and lots of times on Options Evening, and hopefully some of you have got a good idea of some of the differences based on some of the based on some of the lessons that you've been doing in BCM this year. So some of the things that you've been doing in iMedia are creating products, for example, and in terms of GCSE media, it would be more along the lines of looking at Billie Eilish and thinking about her as an actress, as an artist, and how she represents herself and how she uses social media. So the iMedia is 75% coursework, 25% exam, and it's a modular course. You sit the exam at the end of year 10, whereas the GCSE is 70% exam and 30% coursework. So it's the sort of opposite in terms of that.
Brilliant. And just going to the creative iMedia, I guess this is a question that's asked quite a bit, but do we get to go on the computers?
Yes, you do get to go on the computers, and in fact a large proportion of lessons will be spent on the computers, putting together your coursework portfolio. So yes, absolutely.
Great. And do I need to know how to use all of the software?
So we will teach you how to use, we have a Creative Cloud license at school, which is industry standard, which is fantastic. But don't worry, we will teach you how to use Premiere Pro and how to use Photoshop in order for you to be able to create your coursework.
Thank you. And last one on the creative iMedia, and then we'll move on to the media in a moment. But is this a GCSE, and can I use it to get into sixth form or college?
Yes, absolutely. It isn't a GCSE, it is a Cambridge National, but it is the equivalent of a GCSE. It's a vocational course, which is why it's 75% coursework and 25% exam, but sixth forms and colleges will absolutely accept you with the iMedia qualification and see it as being a GCSE.
Perfect, thank you very much. And moving on to the media side of things, do I need to be able to write essays?
Yes, you do, to an extent. So there are some responses that are 20-mark questions, and you will be expected to come to a conclusion during those responses, to kind of analyse texts and then explain how they work. And discuss how far. For example, one of the key questions that we look at is how far, for example, Luther is a crime drama, or how far political bias is evident in newspapers, for example. So yes, you do need to be able to write essays for the GCSE media. There's certainly more of a written component in that than there is in the iMedia.
Sounds very interesting. So on to the next question. Will I get to make any products?
Yes, because it's 30% coursework, you will still get to make, and you will still be taught how to use the software in the same way as you would for the iMedia course. But you will just be creating one product, whereas with the iMedia you create 3 different products: a photography portfolio, a video, and a digital graphic. And then on the GCSE you have one topic that you choose. So for the last couple of years we've had students either creating websites or the opening of a TV drama. Students this year have also been creating the closing of a TV drama, and last year we had students creating film posters.
And lastly, what does media actually mean?
Okay, so media is it's interesting actually, because I think nearly every single other option subject has talked about media this evening. Media is all around us, it's everywhere. It's right now we're using it to communicate with one another. So we kind of cover, in the media side of things, we cover things like how artists use social media. We also look at newspapers, we look at television, we delve into music videos, we spend some time thinking about how film marketing works and how the industry is put together. We also look a little bit at things like Fortnite and the effects debate. So how far are we influenced by what we see in computer games, and understand how all of those different things are regulated.
Great, thank you very much for your time this evening, Mrs. Close.
No worries.
We are now going to move on to business studies with Mr. Slark. Mr. Slark, can you hear us?
I certainly can.
Brilliant. So question number 1 for you. What topics do we cover?
So in GCSE business, we cover a range of topics. So obviously one of the most important things we may be looking at the moment is the impact of not being an EU member, and how does that affect UK businesses. Students look at marketing, so they look at how a company puts an advertising and promotion campaign together. Students also look at finance, business operations, human resources, so looking at how companies recruit and select the best employees. We also then look at how employees motivate their employees. We look at entrepreneurship, and we look at how businesses expand. We look at the reasons why people want to start businesses. And we look at the economic climate on businesses. So we look at globalization, customer services, and we also look at how businesses have adapted and changed because of the current economic climate with COVID-19. So it's very practical and hands-on. So they're the sort of range of topics that we look at.
Cool. What does a typical lesson look like?
So typical lesson looks like, so what we have a lot of discussion going on. So obviously we look at like real life businesses. So students might be in groups discussing particular businesses and case studies. There might be some obviously case studies that students look at and they answer questions. So it's quite a lot of reading and writing within the subject. Students might be asked to create a presentation, so find out some information about a business and present it to the class. Problem solving, looking at sort of numeracy skills. We do quite a lot of exam technique in lessons, so developing students' writing skills to be able to go on to maybe A level, and also maybe role play. That's what a typical lesson would look like.
Great, thank you. How would the students be assessed?
So basically GCSE business studies, so we do the AQA specification. And at the end of year 11, they sit 2 exams, so paper 1 and paper 2, and both exams are 50% each, and it covers all the range of topics that they've been taught from year 10, and there's a range of different questions. So the students will start off like with some multiple choice questions. That's to get the students, you know, sort of motivation and get them engaged. And then it moves through to like case studies. We have like 3-mark, 6-mark questions, and then you might have more extended writing questions at the end, like a 9-mark and 12-mark question. So that's how they're assessed. So there's no coursework, all exam based.
Okay, brilliant. And why should I pick the subject?
I think students should pick the subject because obviously it's a very real life topic. It's everywhere. It's in the media. Obviously, I know I keep going on about COVID-19, but lots of businesses have had to adapt and change. So it's very relevant. If students are thinking of maybe setting up their own company or own business, or they want to become self-employed after leaving school, it gives students an insight into how businesses, you know, how you can set one up. After students have finished maybe year 11, it gives them a good opportunity to maybe go on to sixth form at the Willink to study the vocational qualification, or maybe applying to go on to an apprenticeship. And it also leads to maybe going to university.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Slart, and that is your time up, I'm afraid. So we're gonna move on to computer science with Mr. Fido. Mr. Fido, can you hear us?
I can indeed. Good evening.
Excellent. Good evening. First question for you: what programming languages do we learn?
Oh, very good question. Programming languages. We develop our coding skills in Python. Ordinarily, we'd spend plenty of time in the classroom developing the skills there, hands-on coding. I love Python. It's a great language to start off with. Indeed, if you're already a programmer, it's one that you can pick up really quickly. It's loved by developers, data scientists, software engineers. You know, it's even loved by those hackers because of its versatility. It's flexible. It also has object-oriented features in there, although we don't cover OOP at GCSE. And we also, the new specification, we look at exploring relational databases using SQL, which is probably one of the most, if not the most, installed database query language on the planet. Sorry, IBM and DB2.
And what topics do we cover?
Topics. Well, we begin with the fundamentals of algorithms. We look at how do you break a problem down into chunks that we're going to code against. We call that decomposition. And then we look at abstraction. You know, what's important? Can we cut through the detail and find what's important and what's irrelevant? Then we know what we're going to be developing against. We also then continue our journey towards developers by coding, by looking at how we represent data, for example, the binary within the computers, the language of the computer, the binary. We look at how sound's represented, how images are represented. Indeed, we look at how this video would be transmitted across the internet. We look at computer systems. We break open that black box that is the computer. We look inside it. We look at networks. We sometimes, we would model how a network transmits data. We have students acting as routers, as the IP packet. We flood the network. We see what happens. We bring that to life. We also recently started to now look at relational databases and the structured queries language that I mentioned in answer to the first question, before finally considering the impact of digital technology in terms of the environment, the laws, the legislation, the changes there, the ethical questions, for example, digital implants, and of course the impact of social media. We've seen a lot of sites banning certain individuals because of the fake news that's happening. So we cover everything from the black box of the computer all the way through to how we program it, how we break it open, and how we then communicate using the computers.
Excellent. So we covered the topics. How is it assessed?
How is it assessed? Well, we study two. How is it assessed? We study the AQA specification, which is code 8525. There are 2 papers that students will sit. The first of those looks at the computational thinking and programming. Now that's a 2-hour paper. We get extra time there. We get more time for thinking about how we're going to answer the programming questions. It's a written paper comprising multiple choice, short and extended answers. So that's the computational thinking. The second paper we look at is the computing concepts. It's slightly shorter, 1 hour 45. Again, multi-choice, extended and short answers. Both of those papers are worth 50%.
Excellent, thank you. Is this a good choice for me?
For you, yes, of course it is. Let's think about the world that we're in right now, and what you could go on to be studying later on. Well, the world of work is changing rapidly, really quickly. The jobs available to school leavers now are very different to those of 10 years ago. In fact, maybe even just 10 months ago, maybe 11 months ago. A question to the students on the call: just try to imagine the workplace you'll be entering in just a few years' time. I would suggest that technology is at the heart of all the innovation that's happening, impacting many aspects of our life. Mr. Stark talked about businesses having to pivot, having to change the way they operate. Technology has been at the key of that. Think about the click and collect systems that have had to be developed. If you understand computers, if you understand technology, wow, what a position you're in. So in summary, if you like analytical problem solving, being creative, yes, a fantastic choice for you, really is.
That's great, and you've kind of touched on it there, but what career opportunities does it open up for us?
I'm going to talk about envisioning experts, empathologists, natural user interface designers. You know what, they're jobs that don't really exist today, but they will do. They will do very soon. And because of the rapid rate of digital advancements, I think now more than ever, the career opportunities that this opens up to you are absolutely tremendous. You know, computing devices enable us to get through the pandemic. You know, many careers have benefited from the understanding of computer science. Logistics, for example, how are we going to get the COVID vaccines out there? Healthcare, law, manufacturing, engineering and planning, surgeons, architects. I could go on. The list is endless. As I said, if you like problem solving, if you want to learn methodical, logical skills, yes, it's a tremendous course for you.
Thanks ever so much, Mr. Fido. That's our time up, I'm afraid.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
And I'm going to hand you over to Mr. Ballantyne, who is going to be speaking with Mr. Reid about PE.
Thanks very much, Mr. Fido. And it was a bit of a battle of the backgrounds there. Fantastic background, Mr. Fido. Mr. Reid, can you beat that background? Where are you? Over to you now.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah, I think you can.
We can.
That background is actually taken very early morning on the field several months ago before lockdown, so a little chance to see the field that we've got there.
So in PE, Mr. Reid, how much of the course is practical and how much is theory?
Well, this is a really important question because obviously GCSE is quite different to what's happening now for Key Stage 3. The exams are actually 60% of the whole course. The remaining 40 is what we call NEA, so non-examined assessment. That splits down into 30% of that is actual practical sports, so 3 sports worth 10% each, and then a piece of written coursework, which is the remaining 10%.
And what topics are there in the theory work?
Well, that 6% I just mentioned splits into 2 30% exams. So paper 1 would cover some of the things that people, I think, traditionally think of in PE. So it's anatomy and physiology, it's physical training, and those sorts of things. The second section is something that's a little bit newer, although obviously the lessons we've been running lately, some year 9s will know a bit more about. So that covers the social cultural, it covers some sports psychology, and its final topic looks at health, fitness and well-being.
What sort of things do you do for the written coursework element? What do students do?
Well, the written coursework actually brings together a lot of the topics that they've done through their theory anyway, but it's basically a bit of a self-appraisal. So they look at their fitness level, they look at the fitness needs of their sport, they look at their skills, the skill needs of their sport, and they bring all these together and assess them. And then their final piece is to write an action plan. So having decided what would be their most appropriate area to develop in order to be better in their sports or one sport they choose, they then write how they go about that, whether that's develop fitness or develop a skill.
There's a couple of questions there in one here, because one's just come through on the Q&A. Are there any rules on what sports you can have assessed? And specifically, someone said, can you do horse riding as one of the 3 sports?
The 3 sports, first of all, they're set by the exam board, which is OCR for us, and I've got them all right in front of me here because they have changed them. Equestrian does fall in, so that's a yes to that one. But obviously what we want to do is have a conversation with any students looking to do that, and we can give you exactly the details of what they need to do. The only thing is that they are set by the board, so there's a list, and I'd advise anybody who's thinking of doing PE and they're thinking about their 3 sports to have a chat with their PE teachers about which they can do. There is one rule, which is that they have to choose 1 from the team selection, 1 from the individual selection, and then the third is a free choice.
And is because obviously it's difficult to catch up with PE teachers at the moment. What exam board is there? Exam board are you doing, and is there somewhere they can go and check that list?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's the OCR board, and if you go to OCR and GCSE, it will come up quite easily in the NEA. But obviously with things like parents' evenings, or if you want to contact PE staff with specific questions about sports for the important decision, then feel free to do so.
There's a question coming on the Q&A. The course outline says you must have regularly played for a school or external team. Does this need to be currently, or would previous participation be enough?
The board will ask for a log of competitive participation, and that would exist in the time between the start of the course in year 10 through to the end of the course in year 11. So it would be something that you could do during that time. Obviously, if you are regularly participating now, then you're likely to continue, but they would look at how much you've taken part, and there's lots of opportunities in school under the normal circumstances, which we want you to be involved in, but it also opens up for sports that we don't cover in school, just to make sure you are participating regularly, so that you can get the grade that you would want.
And there's a few more questions coming in specifically on these three sports. How good do you have to be at all three individual support of the sports?
Well, that's quite a difficult question to answer. It depends really on the level of sport that you're playing at. Obviously, to reach the top grades, you would want to be performing regularly, you want to have some skills, and there's a criteria set that you can look at that we would discuss with you. Each sport is only taking 10%, so it's important to sort of put it into the context of how much is the overall. And actually, although the sports are really important, you can see from the breakdown the 60 to 40, and even with the written coursework, that actually is the theory side is going to be particularly significant to you overall. So worth conversations with staff.
And a final one that's come through as well, not a final one, can you do water sports, and do the sports have to be competitive?
They have to be in a competitive situation. That's been relaxed a little bit through COVID, but we're hoping that by the time these the year 9s are coming through to year 10 and 11, it will go back to competitive. It depends on the water sports. There are some different ones. I'm just looking down the list which I prepared. So sailing is on there, for example. If maybe it's a particular question, have they asked a particular sport, Mr. Valentine?
Say again, Mr. Reid?
Is there a particular sport that's been asked about?
No, it just said water sports.
Sailing definitely, but it's canoeing is fine. Any other ones, they can just again contact us directly and we can answer or have a look on that NEA guide.
Mr. Reid, thank you very much. There was one more question from Mr. M. Leach asking, how does the course compare to the O-level spec, which he believes you have experience in, but we don't have time for that, I'm afraid. So I'm going to pass over to Mr. Collot, who has our final guest waiting in the wings. Thank you, Mr. Reid.
Thank you.
Last but not least, we have Mrs. Desai, who is our independent career advisor with us. Are you here with us, Mrs. Desai?
I am, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, very good. Thank you. Good to see you. First, would you be able to explain to us what sort of job you do at the Willing School, please?
Yes, absolutely. I'm employed as an independent careers advisor, which means that the Willing School use me to give advice to students based on what students would like to do after year 11 and also after year 13. So I see year 9s for short option support meetings where we can discuss all of their questions. I see year 10s in separate groups. We've tried to put them into smaller groups following an assembly so we can talk about all of the different options after year 11. And then I see year 11 students for one-to-one appointments throughout year 11 to make sure that they know all of their options for after year 11 and to check they have all of the information about the sixth form and all of the things that they can do.
Thank you very much. How would students be able to organize an appointment with you then for your 9 students about their options?
Ordinarily, year 9 appointments are organised by their tutors. So students can request an appointment if they haven't been able to see me on year 9 options evening. Year 10s, we split into groups normally around March time, based on their interests. We send out a questionnaire and then we will make those appointments. Year 11 students we see according to tutor group. So it's normally done alphabetically unless a student requests an appointment, in which case they become a priority and they can come and see me sooner.
Okay, so your 9 students can can either contact their tutor or email you directly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. What would you like to add about how students should choose their options?
I think there's different ways that you can choose your option subjects. Firstly, I would say to take the pressure off yourselves. The decisions you make now are going forward are going to help you to study the subjects that you're interested in the future, but it's really, really important that you take subjects that you enjoy. Don't be put off taking a subject just because you're not entirely sure what you might do with that subject. It's not always the subject information you'll use, it's the skills that you're going to learn. It's also important to know that there are some subjects that you have to study at GCSE to be able to study them later. Some examples that we have at school are languages. So if you want to study French in the future, you have to have studied French. And we also have drama, where it's necessary to take drama at GCSE, and art. If you want to even consider studying art in the future, it's really, really important that you do take it at GCSE level. Other than that, it's really important to also look at what you're good at. If you can't choose between two different subjects, if you can't quite work out which one you should take and you enjoy them exactly the same, look at which one you're probably best at and the one that it's going to be easiest to get the highest mark in, and use that as a way to decide.
Okay. And how could students check what subjects they need to take at GCSE?
My advice would be to cross-reference with our sixth form prospectus that we have, because all of the A-levels listed in there have the entry requirements in them. So that's actually what I did today. I went through our sixth form booklet and just double checked that I had all of the right information, and it tells you. So if you're interested in maybe taking art in the future, you can go in and you can see what you'd have to get. If you want to take business studies, you can go and have a look on the prospectus and have a look at the entry requirements, and that way you can make sure you're taking the subjects that you need to keep those options open in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess we probably have a lot of year 9 students who are not too sure what sort of career they want to do. Is it worth them talking to you, making an appointment?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, year 9s are very welcome to make an appointment to chat to me. We wouldn't expect any student in year 9 to know what they wanted to do in the future. That's not what we're asking. It's just really important, if there's any subjects that you might want to consider taking further as you get older, that we keep those options open, and that's how we help you choose your year 9 options going forward.
Thank you very much. This is very useful information. I will now pass you on to Mr. Ballantynes to close the evening.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Desai. Thank you very much to all of our speakers this evening. A couple of minor technical hiccups, but we got there in the end. And we'll make sure that a recording of tonight's video will be on the website, so you can easily skip to each of the subject Q&As. I'll try and edit out the technical bits, maybe have a bloopers roll, that sort of thing. But it will all be there on the website. If you look there now, actually on the website, you'll see there's links to the course outlines and also to a range of other videos that that students have seen in the past. As ever, please do contact the school if you have any further questions. Have a good evening.